Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Recently come to light is what appears to be an official autopsy report for Kiely Rodni, listing the cause of death to be pending. And because the cause of death is pending, that means it is not just a simple accident. I get that now. So I just want to take my hat off to all my fellow creators in true crime. Guys, I'm really sorry. You were right and I was wrong. I should have known. Being the outlier, being the only one out there with a different opinion, most of you had to have been on the right track to begin with. I see that now. I'm not sure what I was thinking, so I hope you'll accept my unreserved apology.
I offer a complete and utter retraction. The imputation was totally without basis in fact and was in no way fair comment and was motivated purely by malice.
So I hope you'll accept my apology. I've changed my mind. It's definitely foul play, right? Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Now, we are going to deal with the authenticity issue of this document and also the source of this document. It's always a little strange to me that creators aren't transparent about where they get the information from, but it's not a competition. And we're all here to find the truth, not to prove we're faster or smarter or better than someone else, right? So first off, you do know that there are two legal aspects the autopsy tries to address, right? One is cause of death. The other is manner of death. In Kiely Rodni's case, I would expect the cause of death to be drowning. That's my opinion. But it could also be overdose, blunt force trauma, alcohol poisoning, etc. Now, cause of death is used to inform manner of death. And that is really a legally actionable aspect, the manner of death. And it's quite easy to confuse the two. Cause is the mechanism. Someone died because they couldn't breathe or because they took too many sleeping pills. Manner of death is the larger methodology, the system, the setup, the situation that led to this mechanism playing out. So if someone else caused the death, caused the inability to breathe, then it might be a homicide. If the victim intentionally took their own life, then it's a suicide. It can also be accidental. There can also be a natural cause of death, such as dying of old age or having a heart condition and dying of a heart attack or cancer. Besides homicide, suicide, accident, and death by natural causes, there are also two additional options. One can be pending, such as pending further investigation or pending toxicology results, or it could be inconclusive or indeterminate. In other words, yes, if a coroner or medical examiner doesn't know or doesn't have enough information or simply can't be sure of a cause of death, then they'll say so. They'll say pending or inconclusive. In the Nora Corrin case, Nora, this poor 15-year-old teenager, appears to have been sort of out in the jungle for something like 10 days. And when her autopsy was done, they simply couldn't figure out what had happened. And eventually they seemed to feel that she may have died of starvation. And of course, Nora's family didn't like that assessment. They didn't like the fact that there wasn't some involvement by a third party. They didn't like this idea of death by misadventure. And so they requested, I think, a second autopsy. And then I think they sort of got the result that they wanted or expected, which was that something could have happened. They couldn't rule out. In other words, there wasn't enough evidence to show that something had happened. But at the same time, there wasn't enough evidence to show that something hadn't happened, which means because there wasn't enough evidence to show something didn't happen, you could then say, well, you can't rule that out. And obviously in a case where parents lose their child, if there's not a third party, where there's not foul play involved, where do you think the blame would otherwise naturally come to rest? And so can you see why that particular outcome would be preferable? An outcome where someone else was involved. So I want to reiterate the idea that because the cause of death is pending, that means it is not just a simple accident. that means there must be more to it. Well, of course there's more to it. They don't know. Why don't they know in this case? Well, because the human remains were exposed to the elements for 16 and a half days. That's day and night, also submerged in fresh water. And besides bacterial exposure, there was also, and that's in summer, there was also exposure to the zoology of the lake. So do you think it's going to make it difficult to find out what happened? Decomposition is the enemy of the coroner. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to see what was there in the first place. Now, think about, it doesn't sound so simple to me, and I'm glad they're still investigating. Do you think they're investigating a murder? Do you think it's important that they continue investigating this as a murder? Is the murder or the search for a murderer going to clarify what's not evident in the autopsy? Let me say that again. So you are searching for a murderer and you're looking for someone perhaps with fingerprints or who has a baseball cap or something. Do you think that search is going to clarify what happened? Do you think that search is going to clarify what's not evident in the autopsy? That is going to somehow fill in the blanks? Usually it's the other way around, that the autopsy fills in those blanks. You don't kind of find the missing piece by not looking at the autopsy. The autopsy is usually the missing piece. And if the autopsy is not the missing piece, it tends to be the toxicology. So do you really think they're investigating a murder and murder suspects to find that missing piece? Or is the part that they're still investigating, well, the substances, the toxicology? Probably what you're investigating is what Kiely drank and perhaps what substances she took. And that information would potentially come through via the toxicology, not necessarily. That could also be inconclusive. And then theoretically, you could also go and investigate through word of mouth from eyewitnesses. And exactly that happened in the Chris Watts case, where they tried to find out, besides doing the toxicology, they went and spoke to Shanann's friends and tried to find out, did she drink alcohol on the flight, and was she a regular drinker, and what happened when she was in Scottsdale, Arizona, right? So there was a investigation alongside the toxicology, and in that case it was to demonstrate that she didn't drink alcohol. So you could do the exact same investigation to determine that she did drink alcohol. Is that then a murder investigation, or is that an investigation to support toxicology and to support questions surrounding the toxicology? Once again, the toxicology is also unlikely to provide a 100% answer to manner of death. And I went at length to explain precisely this, how toxicology doesn't give you the answers sometimes in, for example, the disappearance of Elisa Lam. That's my previous episode. Elisa was submerged in a tank, so also in water, also fresh water, for about the same length of time as Kiely, and also found naked. They couldn't find out how she could have got to the roof, how she could have got into the tank, and how could she have gotten to the roof if all the accesses were locked and only hotel staff had access keys. But the bottom line was Elisa Lam's autopsy was deemed to be inconclusive. Did inconclusive autopsy results mean Elisa Lam was murdered? Well, you can bet social media and influencers covering that story jumped all over that and waved that as proof that their conspiracy theories of foul play held water. Exactly the same is happening right now in the Kiely Rodni case. The uncertainty of the autopsy, which I believe to be true, even though we do need to do our due diligence and figure out where this report comes from and if it's legit. And I have done due diligence and I have, I think, figured that out. We'll get to that in a moment. But that uncertainty doesn't automatically mean foul play. The autopsy is inconclusive. That doesn't automatically mean foul play. It doesn't mean an accident either. It simply means the coroner can't say. But you can bet your bottom dollar social media will play it that further investigation means further investigation into foul play. Further investigation means a murder investigation. I also want to say, although on the face of Elisa Lam's toxicology, although it seemed to show zero connection to her death, it did turn out to be a huge clue. It wasn't too much medication or alcohol in her system, it was too little. She was under-medicating, but you would only know that if you knew Elisa's backstory. So the toxicology, although it didn't seem to show a connection to her death, actually it did, if you knew how to read it, if you knew what was actually going on, if you knew about Elisa. And I do wonder whether the small amount of alcohol found in Elisa's system actually aided her delusional psychosis. In a weird way, what happened to Elisa was, I believe, the opposite of what happened to Kiely. Elisa lost touch with reality and lost her way, not because of an excess of substances as you'd expect, but because she wasn't taking certain medication, because certain substances weren't there. In Kiely's case, I think she got lost because of an excess of certain substances. In other words, what you would expect. And I think her age, her slightly built frame, the fact that she's a female, all played into why she was more intoxicated than the other seniors there, why she was more vulnerable to that. Now, if Kiely did die in an accident because she was driving under the influence, what killed her? Did the alcohol or drugs or the polypharmaceutical action kill her, or did she die because she drowned? You can see that being intoxicated is an aggravating factor or a factor associated with the cause of death. That's another option a coroner can rely on, as we saw in the John Benet Ramsey case. You can have something associated with something else, and I wonder whether we'll see that here. And now let's deal very quickly with Kanika Jenkins. That's another intertextual case, and that is of a 19-year-old who also died in a hotel, this time inside a refrigerator in the Crown Plaza Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois. Now think about Kiely, think about Elisa Lam, and think about Kanika Jenkins. All of them end up in a container that they're unable to escape from. Why is that? Is it because someone put them there, or because they somehow got lost and couldn't figure their way out of this container? And I think in all these cases there was darkness and cold and disorientation and a certain amount of substances that were either irregularly present or irregularly absent. Now, even though Kanika was clearly intoxicated, and toxicology confirmed this, her family and others insisted foul play was involved, and they sued the relevant authorities. Do you think they succeeded? In the Jenkins case, the Rosemont Police Department didn't suspect foul play, but they stated that the investigation was incomplete. So what do you think? Was there foul play? What was the outcome of the manner of death, do you think? And did the family succeed in winning their lawsuit? We'll deal with the intertextuality of Kanika Jenkins in forthcoming analysis, but first I want to deal with the baby steps of true crime, which is really what you ought to be taught in the first 5 minutes of true crime investigation on day 1 of your course in True Crime 101. Check your sources. So what is the source of this document, this autopsy report of Kiely Rodni? Well, I believe there's a lot of bickering about the authenticity of the document, which is par for the course, where so much of true crime is fake crime. I think fake crime are so used to being fake. When something legit comes along, or anything comes along that's not from them, well, it has to be fake. A little like the pot calling the kettle black. The fact that her name is spelt wrong, Kiely Rodni, with an N-E instead of N-I, that's the sort of amateurish error you'd expect would give a mischievous opportunist away. Now, I must say, in the searches for my videos, I can see that a lot of people, even now, even today, don't know how to spell Kiely Rodni. It's Kiely-Rodni. I see people spelling it Kelly and Kiley and almost every permutation except the right one. The other problem is that the date looks weird. At the very least, it's incomplete. This is often exactly how true crime social media works. At the point when nothing is happening, but when the demand is at a peak for information, for answers, well, they magically appear. If it seems too good or too bad to be true, well, maybe it's because it is. So I did find the source for what appears to be the autopsy report. There's a Twitter profile with, at the moment, 11 followers. They've put up 17 tweets. It seems to be a new channel that's recently hit 1,000 subs. They've also provided a source, a receipt for the request for the autopsy report. I do find it ironic that given what we're talking about on TCRS these last few days, the document itself is watermarked to say informational, not a valid document. Not a valid document to establish identity. And then there's a reference under that, I guess, to the source. You guys can have a look at that yourselves. Although the source matters, ultimately, I don't think it really matters in this particular argument, in this particular part of the conversation, whether it's legit or not. I do think even if it wasn't, the actual autopsy would likely appear quite similar as inconclusive, certainly prior to the release of the toxicology, and perhaps even subsequently as to cause of death. I mean, that's what law enforcement have been saying all along. We don't know. Can someone from the party come forward and tell us something? So for me, the larger, more important point to make is this idea that if something is inconclusive, it's automatically suspicious. That was the diver's response, remember, because he had very little experience in that situation. That's also much of true crime's response because, well, perhaps for the same reason, but also because fake crime wants to tell you foul play because it thinks that's what you want to hear. Is that what you want to hear? And telling you what you want to hear is how fake crime prints money. Isn't that why you clicked on this video? So I'm not going to take it further than that. I do just want to remind you that this channel tries to set itself apart, tries to distinguish itself as a critical thinking true crime channel. We are more interested in truth than in clicks. We're more interested in finding genuine insights than subverting fake insights for popularity. So if you are honestly, sincerely, genuinely interested in the truth and the true story and the search for truth, then you may find this channel is a good fit for you. Otherwise, maybe not. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.